Hello, everyone, and welcome to Module 2. Here I am in my virtual library because we are going to be talking in this module about reading in an academic context. So let me say a few words about the general topic for this module, and then I'll go into more specifics about um, the kinds of skills and strategies we're going to be looking at, and then an overview of the activities and assignment set you're going to be asked to complete. So clearly, we're all here and engaged in a class that's a freshman composition. It's about writing. So why are we talking about reading? Well, turns out that reading is actually a fundamental skill that really helps us to become stronger writers. There have been many, many, many studies done on this, and what that research shows us is that the more that we are exposed to language through reading, the more influence that has on our writing ability. Specifically, when we read different kinds of text, and it doesn't really matter what kinds, but hopefully well-written kinds, right? When we read various texts, we're exposed to different styles of writing, vocabulary that might be new to us, different patterns of sentence structure and things like that. And also, when we read more, especially in academic kinds of reading, we are engaged in more critical thinking. We may be doing some analysis about what the author is trying to get across to us, to whom they are addressing their message, and the various kinds of strategies and moves that they're making to make their argument more persuasive or to get their point across. So the more we expose ourselves to different kinds of texts, the more influence we have and things that we can pick up to incorporate into our own writing. That doesn't mean that you have to read, the great works of literature or lots of scholarly articles for there to be a benefit. Really, in my opinion, the more that you read things that you enjoy, and and if you can try to expand a little bit to maybe some different genres, or pick up some new things, maybe even related to topics that you're interested in, that's really beneficial. So in this module, our focus is going to be on a couple of major items. Firstly, we're going to be looking at some reading strategies. Now, we've all learned to read. We're all here in college, right? You're here in a college classroom. Clearly, you know how to read. You are literate, no doubt about it. But often, we get a little bit rusty with some of those strategies that help us to really absorb and comprehend the content well. And some folks, might find themselves sort of having to read and reread a passage, especially if it's written in language that's a little bit more elevated or academic. And that can be taxing on our patience and slow us down. So these skills that we're going to be reviewing in our textbook in Chapter 2 will give you some strategies that you can use that might make breaking the reading down and helping you to understand it a little bit easier. You'll notice that Chapter 2 discusses a handful of strategies. The ones that we're going to be focusing on in this module and that you'll be practicing will include coding, annotating, and the KWL chart. That means know, want to know, and learned, I think, is what that sort of symbolizes, those letters, KWL. So coding, and you'll read about this in the textbook, coding is a way for you to use a set of sort of symbols or marks as you go through a text, and to sort of insert those little symbols in different places in the text as you read. And that might be like indicating areas of the text that you really agree with or that you disagree with, or marking words that are unfamiliar to you that you want to look up. The codes might also include things that surprise you or that you have questions about, things like that. In this module, you'll be offered a set of codes that I'm asking you to use for demonstration purposes, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't come up with some of your own codes too, if that's helpful to you. The next concept that we'll be looking at is annotating, and that really just means taking notes. It's a fancy word for taking notes. So the concept there with annotating is that as you move through a text, you engage with it, and maybe out to the side in the margin or possibly on a separate piece of paper, you would make notes about what you're reading. And that might include summarizing the point a little bit in your own words, offering some reaction, whether you agree or disagree, or maybe making some connections to your own experience or previous knowledge. And that's a really good way to think critically about a text. And then another strategy that we're going to be looking at is the KWL chart. And that sort of involves a little bit of like before you start reading, what is your impression just by looking at the text, about what it might be about and what you already know about the topic. And then the W, what you want to learn would be, what are you hoping to get from this text? And then you engage in the reading, and then there's the L part, which is, what you actually gleaned from the text itself, what you took away from it. So those are some of the key strategies that we're going to be incorporating in this module in the reading strategies assignment. So I hope that you'll read through those in more detail. The textbook, Chapter 2, offers a good overview of why it's important to apply these kinds of skills in an academic context when reading, and also gives you some deeper explanation of some of those techniques. And you'll notice that in Module 2, I've also included some resources that summarize those particular strategies as well. So feel free to take your time and review that information before you get started with the Reading with Strategy assignment. The next thing that we're going to explore and hopefully deepen our knowledge about in this module is taking a look at some of the critical thinking aspects of analyzing a text. What goes into that? So there's some main components. First, what is the purpose of the text? You might pick up a newspaper, for instance, and look at an editorial. The difference between a straight news piece and an editorial is that an editorial is intended to deliver an opinion and not just the facts and circumstances of an event or an issue. So the purpose of an editorial is really to persuade, right? It's offering an opinion, and its purpose is to compel the audience to accept the author's point of view, right? So different texts, though, have different purposes. For instance, what's the purpose of a poem or a short story? Is it to entertain? Is it to ask you to reflect or make personal connections? What is the purpose of, say, a journal entry that you've written in your own diary, right? All kinds of texts are out there. Almost anything can be considered a text, from a cartoon to a movie to a sculpture to, something that's published in a book, right? And they all have a different, or there are many different possible purposes. So your first job as a reader is to figure out, what is this text trying to do? What is the goal of this text? And then another important question to ask yourself when you first encounter a text is, who is this text really intended for? And what I mean by that is, when you look at the text or you review the text, are you able to discern for what kind of audience the writer was thinking this piece would be targeted towards? So if you are in the doctor's office and you're paging through a parenting magazine, right? clearly the intended audience for that publication is parents, right? If you're on the internet and you're searching through articles or you're going to different websites, let's say that you're looking for um, things about cooking or beauty, right? The different websites that you're going to visit based on those topics will probably be targeting specific kinds of readers or viewers, right? So trying to figure out what's the main goal of the text and to whom is the text really written for, right? Written to. Another aspect then also is what we call stance, and that is another fancy word kind of for the author's attitude or mood, right? Is the stance humorous, very serious and academic? Is it persuasive? And we can kind of figure that out sometimes, not because we have a live encounter with the author, but because we are able to see the kinds of language and word choices that the author is using, the tone of the piece, right? Things of that nature. And then another final part of analyzing a text might be to consider the genre. And so, what is the kind of type of class? What the type of text that we're encountering? Is it a poem? Is it fiction? Is it a news piece? Is it an editorial? Is it written in a magazine? Is it a scholarly article on a database? So we were kind of looking at what the genre of writing is. And that too might help us to kind of analyze and pick apart and think critically about how the text is functioning. So that's a kind of a big summary of the concepts that we're going to be looking at in Module 2. The things that we'll be working on, the practical applications of this knowledge, are going to include a couple things. So I'm asking that you apply what you learn about those strategies, coding, annotating, the KWL chart, to an assignment called Reading with Strategy. And that's where you'll be using those specific skills on an article that I've assigned to you to read. And then the next activity that you'll be completing will be a discussion activity. And for this module, there's only one discussion topic. That topic is going to also focus on a particular article that I've assigned you to read, and you'll see that there in the discussion topic. And I'm asking you to apply some of the analysis concepts. So looking at what you think the purpose of the article is, who the intended audience is, etc. And we'll engage in discussion together around that piece of information. So it's not a tremendous amount of work, but it is a direct application of the skills that we're going to be reviewing and the concepts we're going to be reviewing in this module and in our text. A quick note about the textbook. Please see the announcement that I've included that gives you some additional information about the textbook for this class and how to access that. Okay, so I believe that is all of the wisdom that I have to share with you about Module 2. Of course, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions at all. I'm happy to help you. Just a click or a phone call away. So reach out to me if you have questions or you're confused about how to complete any of the activities or assignments. I look forward to your responses in the discussion, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.